voice.
Promoting adaptation and resilience to climate change in Africa. Lessons learned Lessons learned from the Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this short health break. Climate change remains one of the most pressing challenges of our continent. However, it also provides opportunities to foster innovation, creativity, and sustainable and resilience and collaboration across the continent. In this session, we will delve into key lessons and strategies to address these challenges through actionable policies and transformative initiatives. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Andrew Agie Holmes from ISSER Ghana. He will take us through the discussion.
Morning. So, thanks a lot for making time for this section. We extend our gratitude to Professor Tina Moyo, Dr. Tinashe, and our Executive Director for putting the session together. Other people like Dr. Brian Mulenga were also instrumental in organizing the session. So primarily, the climate question is not new to any of us. And now I think the new dimension we've added is what we call climate chaos. Because a lot of things are happening we don't really understand. So at the top level, during COP, Paris Agreement, etc., there has been a strong call to do something about climate change. So somehow we did get a project or a program called CASI, and simply put, an attempt to make inroads into the climate issues on the continent. I think a second important point is that despite the fact that Africa pollutes little, we bear the brunt of climate change. So we need to do something about it through some mitigation efforts and through some adaptation efforts. So in 2021, with the help of ANAPRI and sponsors like the USAID, we did launch the Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative during the COP then. And we began a pilot project across four countries: Ghana, Zambia, Rwanda, Senegal. Primarily, ANAPRI took the work in Zambia and Ghana and did activities over a period of 1.5 and 2 years. So today we want to do three things. First of all, pay attention to some of the lessons that these pilot projects have taught us. Second, gather some feedback from you as key stakeholders, and also look at the way forward as to what we can do with the lessons we've learned. To help me do that, we would have two very quick keynotes, and then we will have 6 panelists, some online and some here with us. So without much ado, I'll call on our colleague Benim Ayob to give us a very brief keynote, and then we'll follow that up with some, please come forward, with some input from our colleague Hassan Nyambe, who would also have a chance. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, this is great. I'm very soft-spoken, so I like speakers. Thank you so much for inviting me to open this very important session. Climate change is indeed one of the most challenging issues we are facing. USAID has been at the forefront in addressing challenges exacerbated by a warming planet, by providing thought leadership in collaboration with many stakeholders that are here, and also by funding activities to address the challenge on the ground. The Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative, CACI, is one of the many approaches USAID has taken to address these issues. CACI has addressed climate change by assessing the National Determined Contribution, NDCs, and National Adaptation Plans, NAPs, and helping stakeholders in countries to prioritize, monitor, and put into action some of the changes necessary to meet NDC and NAP targets. USAID has worked with many partners, ANAPRI member institutes, PRCI, IFPRI, Academia 2063, and many others for several years now in several pilot countries. Our partners have been at the forefront leveraging the expertise across these organizations, at the forefront in initiating and implementing CACI objectives. CACI has evolved, of course, over the past year to a broader set of stakeholders through the CACI mechanism implemented by APT Global. One of the advantages of working with ANAPRI and other agricultural policy research institutes is the connections made between agriculture and the environment, and therefore those respective ministries and stakeholders. I look forward to hearing from many of these experts today to learn more about what they have accomplished and how we all can engage more to address climate change related challenges. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Benim. We would now move to a representative for Dr. Hassan to read his keynote for us. A hand for her. Yes, please.
Right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Panduleni Helago from the African Union Commission, and it's a privilege to be here this morning. I will be reading opening remarks on behalf of my colleague, Director Hassan Nyambe, who is the Director of Sustainable Environment and Blue Economy. Unfortunately, he could not be here. As most of you may be aware, there is COP29 happening, and he is a key person at this moment down in the EU. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists and participants, a very good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to engage in this vital discussion on promoting climate adaptation and resilience in Africa. Although I could not be there, I am honored to stand alongside partners who are equally committed to addressing the critical challenges posed by climate change across our continent. Climate change, indeed, is no longer a distant concern. It is present, and it's pressing reality impacting millions of lives in Africa. From erratic weather patterns to persistent droughts and devastating floods, these effects undermine our agriculture, economies, and livelihoods, affecting the most vulnerable amongst us, the women and youth, and marginalized communities. In response to this crisis, the African Union has taken bold steps underpinned by the African Union Climate Change and Resilience Development Strategy. This is a strategy of 2022 to 2032, a 10-year strategy. And this framework serves as an action call to our member states to adopt sustainable, inclusive, and transformative approaches to mitigate climate crisis while enhancing resilience. It is not merely a document, it embodies a vision for how Africa can lead in the global fight against climate change. Today, I would like to highlight 3 key elements of this vision. First is policy alignment and integration. The African Union Commission has prioritized supporting member states in aligning their national strategies with the Paris Agreement. Though mechanisms such as the M&E and lending dashboards, we aim to ensure transparency and accountability, enabling better implementation of national determined contributions, what we abbreviate usually as NDCs, and national adaptation plans, the NAPs. Secondly is collaboration and partnerships. The challenges of climate change cannot be tackled in isolation with the partners. Initiatives such as CACCI exemplify the power of partnerships. By working alongside governments, development partners, the private sector, and civil society, CACI has helped mobilize resources and strengthen institutional capacities to enhance climate resilience. Third, and not last, but last rather, empowering smallholder farmers and vulnerable communities. Agriculture is at the heart of Africa's economy and is one of the sectors most vulnerable to climate change. The African Union is committed to ensuring that adaptation strategies we promote directly the benefits of the smallholder farmers who sustain our economies and feed our population. I think we all know that more or less 60% of African population really depend on agriculture, right? The road ahead requires collective resolve as we reflect on the lessons learned, as well as that of CACI. Let us also outline pathways for future collaboration. Together, we can ensure that Africa's response to climate change is not only robust, but also inclusive and equitable. Finally, I urge all partners here present, governments, donors, and the private sector specifically, to strengthen their support for Africa's climate strategies. Let us mobilize the financial resources required and necessary, the technology required, and exercise necessary plans to build the resilient continent that we all want to see thrive on the face of climate adversity. Thank you, dear all, and we look forward to the outcome of this important session. Signed out by Director Nyambe of the African Union Commission. Thank you very much.
With those remarks from Director, I would like to invite our key panelists here in the room and those online to take a seat, and then we begin our conversation. We want to make it interactive as much as possible. So the first panelist we have here is Dr. Richard Ayisi, a lecturer at the University of Ghana and also a key researcher on the CACI project. Please, can you take your seat? We also do have Mr. Eric Mwewa from the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment, Zambia. Third is Dr. John Hermins at ABT Global, who is supposed to join online, I believe. No. Okay. Then Elisabeth would do us that honor. We have Danani Kahir, also from Boston Consulting, online. Good to have you. Finally, we have John Kihaya Witi, also online. Okay. Welcome, John. So, we would, for no important reason, we'll start with the last panelists who are introduced and begin our conversations around what we are finding in South Africa currently. So, Mr. Whitty, what we want to know is the approaches or the actions or activities being undertaken in South Africa to ensure that the nationally determined contributions in that country is being realized. So what is the country doing at the national level and at the various county levels to ensure that the NDCs that South Africa has committed to is being worked upon and is being met?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks also to the organizers for allowing South Africa to give an overview of what we're doing around climate change response. Yeah, in terms of the question being asked, there's a series of policy interventions that we are implementing. They are at most attempting to address how we are dealing with our NDC, but they are also geared towards setting us on a path towards achieving our low emissions development strategy. So the first thing that we've done now is to translate our policy, which was developed in 2011, into a Climate Change Act. That act was signed into law in July this year. Of course, we are working on a process for promulgation of that act, but there's a lot of policy instruments that are already under implementation. One of them is the determination of what we call sectoral emission targets. These are also called desired emission reduction outcomes. They are assigned to sector departments and they are informed by the policies and measures, at least the objectives and policy objectives within that policy sector. Then we translate that into emission reduction outcomes that are desired. So that process is underway. We've done a socio-economic impact analysis to understand if we implement these sector targets, what will be the impact on society in terms of jobs, livelihoods, our GDP growth, and so on. So that has been done. That we are in the process of getting our cabinet to approve those sector emission targets. We're aiming for that to be done, before the mid of next year. So that's the first thing that we're doing. The second thing that we're doing is we are allocating what we call carbon budgets, but these are really emission limits or assigned amounts to specific sectors or industrial sectors where we have big emitters. So we allocate them emission targets that they must commit to over a 5-year period, because our NDC is for 2030. So we are issuing them limits for a commitment period between 2026 and 2030, which they must comply with. That process is also underway. As we speak now, we are busy with those allocations. All of them must be completed by next year to allow for the commitment period that starts in 2026 to kick in. So that's where we are with that. Additionally to that, we also ask these companies to submit to us what we call mitigation plans, where they will explain how they will meet their allocations, what measures they will put in place to help them meet their allocations. So that's another policy instrument that is linked to these industry limits.
Yeah, so that sounds interesting. So how are we monitoring the carbon budget?
Yeah, so we have an automated system that has been running for the past 5 years, where companies submit their declarations and progress reports. Then we perform analysis. We also have an independent verification scheme that started operating last year, where we hire independent assessors to assess the validity of those reports. So that and working well. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much for those insights from South Africa. I'll also take this opportunity to invite our 7th panelist, Dr. Mohamed Lee, to join us on stage. Thanks a lot. So we moved to Ghana, and we want to learn a bit of your experience in implementing CASI. So what we want to find out is how the CASI work supported the implementation of the NDCs and the NAPs in the country. And we invite Dr. Richard Aisi to give us some insights.
Thank you, Andy, for the question. The specific case of CASI in Ghana has been very interesting, and this morning, two important phrases that we've been hearing is localization and then also demand-driven and capacity gap. What Ghana we did was that we found the need for demand-driven, so because we know that there existed some national level committee that spearhead climate issue, we had an engagement with them, and what came out clear from that is that they needed us to help with the local level capacity gap investigation, because in Ghana, development is at a local level, so whatever is done at the national level needs to be implemented there. So what CASI did was to first investigate the capacity need gap at that local level, and it will interest you to know that we found out that whilst at the national level we have enormous capacity to handle climate issues, at the local level we didn't have much capacity. And so what CASI did was to help with this development, how we can collaborate with this local level to understand the climate issues that we're facing, and also help them with implementing these policies. So it boils down to the localization argument that we've been making this morning, and then we found out interesting evidence from that. One key thing that came out from CASI implementation there is that there is a need. At the local level, we have different adaptation needs, and we have different ecological systems. So there was a need for us to have specific adaptation frameworks that are key or that are in relation to different local level. And so there was a need for us to, in the way forward, have a way of creating this district-specific adaptation frameworks, and also help the local level, give them the capacity to gather data of what is the situation there, and most importantly, help them create some form of investment map, where here, anybody that tries to visit the local level, they know what exists and what will help them to achieve their adaptation need. And so you don't need to go through any process, just have this investment map, note that when you do this ABC, you are going to achieve this adaptation resource. And so this is what we found out from the local level, which needs to be helped out.
Yeah. So in your opinion, how feasible is it for the districts or the county, so to speak, to develop their own adaptation plans?
Yes, so they will need this thing with the help of stakeholders. Particularly, that's what ISA we are doing with them. So yes, they have the capacity in terms of how things are done, but they lack the capacity in terms of establishing these frameworks. And so what ISA is going to do, the way forward in terms of helping them, is to help them come out with some of these frameworks. And that is what we have been in engagement with them. And I know this morning Dave and then made mention of the fact that we visited some district assembly before coming here. It came out clearly that they needed support in this regard.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Mohamed Lee, before we allow you to catch some breath, we want to attack you with one pointed question. So, for the Senegal case, ways would you say CASI has helped to shape the climate adaptation policies?
Thank you very much. So, I think I'll go in French to make more flow in my intervention. So as I'm reporting also the activity that was based on our expert. Merci beaucoup. Je vais continuer en français pour être beaucoup plus fluide par rapport à mon intervention. Je vais parler
put
de...
on your earphones. He will speak in French. Continue. Vous pouvez
C'est
continuer.
bon. Voilà. Je voudrais simplement parler de l'expérience du Sénégal par rapport au projet CASI, qui a été très important à faire en quelque sorte ce qu'on appelle un MRV donc sur le NDC en ce qui concerne les aspects d'atténuation et d'adaptation au changement climatique, en répondant aussi aux engagements aussi du Sénégal par rapport au NDC. Pour rappel simplement que pour le NDC, il y a les deux volets, le volet atténuation et le volet adaptation, et aussi c'est complété aussi par le plan national d'adaptation, donc sur le volet adaptation. Et sur ça, le projet CASI donc, a permis aussi donc, de faire un revue d'un certain nombre d'indicateurs, qui soient des indicateurs sur le volet économique, des indicateurs sur les technologies qui existent, les indicateurs aussi donc d'un point de vue institutionnel, qu'est-ce qui a été établi donc au niveau du Sénégal. Et les difficultés rencontrées, c'était beaucoup plus sur l'accessibilité aussi donc de ces données-là, donc qui n'existent pas forcément donc à travers par exemple les différents indicateurs qui ont été répertoriés dans le cadre de CASI. Ça, c'était les difficultés qui ont été rencontrées. Bon, néanmoins, donc on a pu travailler sur des indicateurs donc beaucoup plus compréhensibles, donc qui ont permis aussi donc d'aller dans un certain nombre, par exemple, d'acquis dans le cadre de ce projet-là. Et par rapport à ceci, donc nous pouvons simplement, par exemple, parler aussi donc des acquis d'un point de vue des progrès, par exemple, du pays en termes, par exemple, du mix énergétique, par exemple, quand on regarde aussi le Sénégal a fait beaucoup d'efforts donc sur les questions de mix énergétique, donc avec en réduisant par exemple l'utilisation par exemple des fossiles, avec beaucoup plus par exemple d'énergie solaire, etc., qui a été implémenté aussi au niveau du Sénégal. Je pense que ça aussi c'est un acquis à travers aussi les engagements du Sénégal. Et l'autre aussi, dans le domaine de l'agriculture aussi, donc il y a pas mal de technologies, donc en ce qui concerne par exemple l'agriculture intelligente face au changement climatique, donc il y a pas mal de technologies qui ont été mises en œuvre au niveau du Sénégal, et ça aussi c'est des acquis. Il y a pas mal aussi donc d'initiatives aussi dans ce cadre-là. Et aussi des efforts aussi ont été mis en œuvre aussi dans le cadre aussi des politiques de la gestion des forêts. Donc ça aussi c'est des acquis dans le cadre qu'on a pu aussi mentionner dans le cadre des initiatives qui ont été dirigées par le projet CASI. Et aussi en termes de protection sociale, je pense aussi le Sénégal a fait aussi pas mal d'efforts en termes de protection sociale, donc avec les bourses familiales, etc. Je pense que ça aussi c'est des choses pour renforcer aussi la capacité aussi donc des ménages vulnérables. Donc je pense que ça aussi c'est un acquis très important aussi. Pour rappel simplement que cette analyse-là, c'est une analyse pour faire la différence, pour faire un review en faisant la différence entre la mise à jour des NDC actuellement. Donc je pense que ça c'est le travail qui a été est fait pour faire le progrès du Sénégal en termes, par exemple, d'acquis et de progression, donc pour la mise en œuvre et la mise à jour donc, du NDC, donc pour atteindre aussi donc, les engagements au niveau international dans le cadre de l'accord de Paris. Donc voici quelques aspects, quelques bien acquis aussi, donc à travers aussi le projet CACI, donc qu'on a pu analyser dans le cadre au niveau du Sénégal. Merci.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So, in your opinion, what additional support will Senegal require as we look ahead?
Merci beaucoup. Pour le Sénégal, je pense qu'il y a pas mal de choses qui ont été faites. Par exemple, en parlant par exemple de quelque chose de très important la mise en œuvre par exemple de ce qu'on appelle le COMNAC dans un premier temps, parce qu'au Sénégal, il y a un comité technique donc, qui est chargé de superviser dans un premier temps, d'un point de vue scientifique aussi, et donner aussi des conseils en termes, par exemple, sur les questions scientifiques, sur la mise en œuvre aussi et l'implémentation, par exemple, des questions d'adaptation et d'atténuation au niveau du Sénégal. Maintenant, ce qu'il y a à améliorer aussi au niveau du Sénégal, donc vu l'analyse qui a été faite dans le cadre de CACI, donc je pense qu'il faut renforcer la gouvernance. Et les engagements politiques donc dans le domaine de l'adaptation et de l'atténuation. Ça c'est quelque chose de très important. Et aussi, avec les partenaires de développement, je pense qu'il faut aussi améliorer aussi le renforcement de capacité, des acteurs, des stratégies de développement donc actuellement en cours. Ça, je pense que c'est un aspect très important. Et aussi, il faut aussi une meilleure implication de la société civile aussi. Donc voilà, donc sur ces aspects-là, donc en termes par exemple d'éducation, en termes par exemple d'efforts donc pour poursuivre l'implémentation aussi donc de ces progrès du Sénégal. L'autre chose aussi, en termes de recherche, je pense que aussi il y a pas mal d'informations, il y a pas mal aussi donc d'efforts à faire dans ce sens-là, pour fournir des informations de bonne qualité à tous les acteurs à différentes échelles, donc aussi à l'échelle locale, à l'échelle au niveau national. Je pense que ça, c'est un effort à faire et qui est très important en termes de recherche aussi au niveau du Sénégal. Et au niveau à l'échelle beaucoup plus fine, à l'échelle des communautés, je pense que aussi il y a pas mal de sensibilisation aussi à faire. Donc je pense qu'il faut développer aussi des politiques, parce que dans ces dernières années, par exemple, des institutions comme le CSE a mis en place ce qu'on appelle le bureau de référence bureau de référence pour le changement climatique, qui est chargé par exemple d'appuyer au niveau des collectivités territoriales la prise en compte dans les plans de développement locaux. Et je pense que ça, c'est un aspect très important donc, pour les permettre donc, d'aller dans une mobilisation des ressources et aussi permettre aussi donc, de mieux prendre en compte les risques climatiques dans les politiques de développement. Donc je pense que ça, c'est des aspects très importants qu'il faut améliorer aussi dans le cadre de ce projet CACI. Merci.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, we'll turn our attention to our colleague Danani, who is from Boston Consulting, to share some insights in their experience working in Zambia and Nigeria regarding climate adaptation.
Thanks so much, Dr. Andrew. So first of all, thank you all to everyone and to ANAPRI for inviting us to participate in this panel and this discussion. So with CACI, we had a focus on Zambia and Nigeria, and what the intention of this work was to apply a framework and to really help drive and develop a what we think about as an investable adaptation plan, investable national adaptation plan. And to do this, the process that we undertake is a heavily analytical one. And in Zambia, what we did was we started off with what we call a progress stock take. So really looking at, rather than reinventing the wheel and doing a fresh analysis to begin with, we start with looking at what is out there, what is the content that has been developed by the government, by other donors, by the plethora of institutions, and synthesizing that with an intention then of providing a very clear 360-degree synthetic view of where the country stands regarding project planning, regarding pipeline development, fundraising, implementation. And that's the work that we did in Zambia. In Nigeria, we took that work, but we went 2 steps further, right? The 2 steps further we went to was first doing a very in-depth vulnerability assessment. So across all the climate drivers that Nigeria is facing, and looking at it, it's essentially mapping it to the level of half a square kilometer. And what is the data analytics saying about that granular climate risk at that very local level? And we've talked a lot about localization today. Then taking that assessment and developing a project portfolio and curating that project portfolio to say, well, we know what these are the climate risks that we're facing in certain parts. How do we take that risk and turn it into an opportunity for investment? And looking at that list of investments, defining what those investments would be, and then triaging them as to who would be funding it, right? So some projects require public sector financing, some projects require are bankable and require private sector financing, and then there's some in the middle where you need catalytic capital to take it forward. So developing that curated project portfolio, those are the 2 steps: the vulnerability assessment and the project portfolio that we applied in the context of Nigeria. And then, the following steps that come after that are mobilizing the resources and then doing implementation and monitoring, right? So if I go back a step and talk about Nigeria and what we found and what we learned in Nigeria, right? So, I'll start with Zambia because that's where we started out. So, the socioeconomic context is challenging, but there are 3 critical climate impact drivers that amplify the vulnerability of the country. The country is already among the 25 or 30 most vulnerable countries, according to I think it's the 50th most vulnerable country in the Notre Dame Gain score. But the 3 factors that are going to amplify the impacts are drought, flooding, and chronic heat in Zambia, right? So the analysis suggests that there'll be about 200 millimeters more of rainfall decreasing every year, so that's causing drought. But at the same time, a 9.7% increase in precipitation days. So we have drought at one part, but also flooding on the other hand, and then a chronic heat of about 3.5 degrees temperature rise. So what does this tell us about where they stand, and what would be the impact of that? And the impact comes, in social, economic, and natural sizes. On the social side, the analysis showed that about 300,000 people would fall below the poverty line because of climate change in Zambia. And also, you would have 3 times as many more heat-related deaths relative to the number of deaths we had in the year 2000. So social impact is quite challenging with climate change. On the economic impact side, we estimated that you would have a loss of about $5.4 billion over a decade in agriculture. So just in the agriculture sector, which is the primary sector in Zambia, you would have $5.4 billion of GDP loss and a commensurate decrease of about 13% of water availability. So both of those playing in factors. And then on the natural side, the amount of species lost was actually quite staggering, and that was what I found very, very, very challenging. That in the southwest and southeast of the country, you would have about 30% of species lost, and in addition to that, you have an acceleration of deforestation. So you can see that the analysis that we undertook laid out a pretty grim picture of what would happen in Zambia if we do nothing, right? So at the same time, we said, well, what are the levers that we have available to address these issues, right? And those levers were, in the policy and planning side, in the risk assessment and tracking side, in the response side, and in the sector readiness side. So looking at each of these and saying, well, when it comes to policies and planning, what do we see as where they can play and what they can do? And we found that Zambia is actually taking really strong strides on the policy impact side. On the risk assessment side, we found that the foundational risk monitoring systems are in place, including, very importantly, a dedicated meteorological department, right? But there's still need for major investments to modernize the technology infrastructure on the risk assessment. On the response side, readiness across human capital and infrastructure was still nascent. It's still nascent. There's a lot more investment we need to do. We've talked a lot about capacity building earlier today. And so, as an example, Zambia is currently deploying early warning systems for droughts among small-scale farmers, but that needs to be scaled up. And when we looked at sector readiness, we know that over the last 10 years or so, there have been over 100 projects that have been implemented, resulting with an investment of $1.6 billion, mostly for vulnerable sectors, and particularly agriculture, forestry, water and sanitation, health. And so all this suggests that there is a good pathway going forward in terms of what Zambia needs to do and build on some of the strengths, right? And so with that in mind, we said, well, what are the project archetypes that could be undertaken going forward? And we see really that there's three big areas where investment needs to happen. Please.
Yeah, as you wrap up, I want you to reflect on the private sector's appetite for some of the levers that you have identified.
Yes, exactly. So this is exactly where I was going, right? So what you need to understand are that the private sector needs very specific projects. Oftentimes when we have these discussions, we said we need the private sector to come in. But private sector is not an amorphous thing. It's specific companies and investors investing in specific projects, right? And each of those projects that they invest in, they do diligence on. They try to understand, will this project be cost neutral? Will it make money? Is the financing and the financial structure to deliver that project the right one, right? And so the analysis that needs to happen, like I said, is understanding what are the challenges, and then based on the very granular specific challenges a country has, is building a list of pipeline projects and saying, okay, well, we know that we need a seawall, or we know that we need drainage, or we know we need heat mitigation. Well, what are the projects that we would then need to do? Defining those specific projects and then looking at those projects individually and their financial model and saying, well, this project is bankable. Therefore, let's take it to the private sector. Let's take it to the IFC. Let's take it to the AFDB. Let's take it to specific investors and say, look, it's a bankable project. We know it's workable. We're here to help you. Then there's going to be projects that are not in that category of bankability, but they're not far from that. And what you need here is catalytic money, right? So money that comes in that is concessional and that allows for the risk to be shared between the provider of that catalytic capital and the investor. And when you go to an investor and say, look, this project is not bankable, but we have catalytic capital that makes it bankable, and we've already put that together, and now it's available for you to make the investment. Then you find that they come in quite more often.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a whole category of projects that are not bankable at all, and that public money needs to sort of cover.
Thanks a lot, then. So I'll also take this opportunity to mention that we have two other colleagues online, Kinda and Molly, and they will join in the conversation in the end. But for now, I want to move to our colleague, Dr. Nelishibu, to also do a bit of reflection on what her organization is doing. So from afar, we want you to just give us some understanding of what do you think of CASI and how it helped countries like Senegal, and how you think we can take it forward.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew. And I will say that I'm actually representing my senior colleague, who is the Deputy Global Project Director for CASI, John Hemmans, who's not able to be with us. There's a lot of Thanksgiving, I think, happening in the United States at the moment, so people need to be with family. Well, work-life balance. So I'm here really representing John, who would have loved to be here.
Yeah.
So earlier on, Dr. Andrew talked about the fact that we've had a CASI phase 1, and a lot of what has been discussed so far is the work that was done under phase 1 of CASI. We are now in the phase 2 stage of implementing CASI, because phase 1 was more of developing some kind of prototype. It was a lot of piloting happening in the countries that have so far spoken. And a lot of lessons have been learnt from the work that was done under CASI 1.0. And I want to say that ANAPRI and Academia 2063, as well as MSU, through the PRCI vehicle, were involved in conceptualizing CASI and launching the pilot in Africa. So currently, CASI is being implementation of CASI is being led by APT Global, who I represent here today. And APT Global, for some of you who may not know us, we believe in driving social impact through curiosity and cutting-edge research to move people from vulnerability to security. So that is the focus of APT Global. We are based in Africa. Well, we do work in Africa. We also do work in Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as Asia and the Pacific, so global. However, here we're talking about our work in Africa. Under CASI 2.0, a few changes have been made, very few changes. Initially, you've noticed that the work under CASI 1.0 was heavily focused on food security, on issues around agriculture and food. CASI has now expanded slightly to include other sectors. And you know that when you visit these COP meetings, you find that new thematic areas are popping out. I mean, agriculture was only visible in Cancun, right? And recently, we are hearing more around climate health and the nexus between climate and health. So that is an area that APT Global is looking at supporting through CASI, and there are other thematic areas that we are involved in. So besides the work that was done in Zambia, Ghana, Senegal, and Rwanda, and Nigeria, of course, which we've mentioned up there, we are still engaging in Zambia as CASI, looking at areas such as the enabling environment policy, looking at issues such as Kahia was talking about, development of bankable projects, very important. Looking at climate health. Another segment that we have added to the work that was done under ANAPRI and Academia 2063 is the significance of the private sector in the agenda for climate action. And so some of you may be familiar with the MOU that was signed between USAID and some private sector institutions, up to about $10 billion to see how the private sector can support African countries implement smart solutions that would support resilience and as well as mitigation. And so we have been working with organizations such as Genesis Energy Group, who are working in Zambia to help Zambia implement those smart solutions, working in areas such as rural electrification, etc., climate health as well. And so this is what we're doing. We are also looking at strengthening the element of gender equality and social inclusion within the context of CASI. I'm not sure, I believe it was implied under CASI 1.0, but Jessie is very visible in the work that we are doing under CASI 2.0. One other segment that we are looking at as CASI is support to continental level institutions such as the African Union Commission. CASI, in partnership with Academia 2063 and the African Union Commission, have conceptualized what is being called the Monitoring, Reporting, and Learning Dashboard. Those of you who are familiar with the Malabo Biennial Review reporting, this agenda is a bit similar. It will be a continental digital dashboard that will be used to track implementation of the AU climate strategy. So to date, working with Academia 2063, what has happened is that we have developed an integrated results framework, a continental integrated results framework, and some initial key performance indicators that will inform a prototype. And so this prototype is being developed by Academia 2063, and I believe it is almost ready for to share with member states and other key stakeholders for validation, because only then can that digital dashboard be officially launched by the custodians, who are the African Union Commission. And so there is a roadmap that has been developed for the rollout, or rather the development and rollout of the MRLD process, and it will take quite a number of activities, and some of those activities include capacity building, building of countries, capacity building of countries to be able to collect data, do the analysis, and use the dashboard so that they upload information onto that dashboard so that it becomes visible as a one-stop shop. So partners are being invited to participate in contributing to implementation of that roadmap, which is available at the African Union Commission for those who are interested. And so I think those are the issues that are a bit different from what CASI 1.0 was about. But I want to stress the point that there is a lot of lesson learning from the work that was done under CASI 1.0, and APT Global continues to work with those institutions that were involved in the first phase of CASI, and of course have engaged other partners such as BCG, we heard Kahir on the line, WRI, and we work very closely with the NDC partnership. Reason being, we would like our interventions to be demand-driven, and so the NDC partnership collects support requests from countries, and so that is some of the information that we use in countries where NDC partnership actually exists. Our work needs to be aligned to the AU climate strategy, but also the USAID climate strategy, because we rely on the buy-ins of country missions. So country missions need to buy into the work that CASI is proposing. And so this is how the model actually works in recent times. So I'll end there. Thank you.
And Herrick, I'll come to you now as someone from the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment of Zambia. You've somehow benefited from the CASI 1, and I see significant interest from the CASI 2. What are your reflections on the engagements you had with ANAPRI through the CASI 1? What lessons do you think we are learning, and how should we embrace the second wave of CASI?
Thank you very much, colleagues. And as the online guest was presenting about Zambia, I was getting more and more depressed, because it was giving a real scenario as to how vulnerable the country is to climate change. Just to add that last year we had a drought. It affected 72 districts, which is almost half the country, meaning that we have a problem with energy, because our energy is hydro, and also issues of food security. So it's that serious. So let me start from the policy perspective. First of all, we appreciate the efforts CASI has brought on board. Their initial engagement with the government, first of all, they established a very formal relationship with the government, which was a step, in terms of engagement further in terms of climate change. So they came at the right time for the government when we are developing a number of policies and legislation. One of them is a review of the climate change policy, which is quite overdue. Number two is to have the first climate change legislation in the country, which is the climate change bill, which will be enacted, we hope, during the sitting of Parliament currently. But to be more specific on the actions of CASI, there have been so many smaller actions, but they mean big for the government. For example, through CASI, they did the updating of the country status in terms of climate change. We had an old one which was talking about things 10 years ago, but with the update, then it showed us the clear picture as to where we are in terms of climate change. That was very important for the government. In terms of the NAP, we have just developed the NAP and launched them in 2023. It was important that we have credible data. Here I'm surrounded by researchers. You know the importance of having credible data. So through CASI, we were able to establish data clusters where we felt that the information coming from there was better informing the NAP, which we finally developed and launched. We also developed the NAP, the NDCs, and not developing but revising the 2015 NDC to the 2021 NDC, where we increased the number of sectors from 3 to 6. And again, NAP, CASI and USAID, ANAPRI came on board to work with us to the extent where we even developed the implementation framework and also the resource mobilization. This is very important because we want to move from just having these documents to the actual implementation. Now we have those documents, the NDC and the NAP. So we need to move now to implementing those. And also the issues of capacity building. They have talked about capacity building. And sometimes I wonder where the capacity goes. I've been in government 15 years. Every meeting, every workshop, capacity is built. So at some point, I don't know where it goes. That's for researchers to help us with. But somehow it disappears. But I think that shows the need to continuously build that capacity. Human beings are mobile. They're always moving. They retire and stuff like that. So many things have happened from CASI from the government perspective. But just to answer something which just came as we are having this discussion, the issue of developing bankable proposals. I will inform you that 3 years ago, there was a European Union funded project. And it was a country-led where we went to the sub-national, we came to the district, to the provinces, and to the nation to identify bankable proposals, as they're being called. So the European Union provided technical support, and from the 33 proposals which we had, we were left with 11. The European Union further went on in 2022 to say, now we're going to finalize this, fine-tune this to be bankable proposals. So from the 11, we remained with 6. So for the past 2 years, colleagues, we have had these bankable proposals, and we take them at every opportunity. At the COP, at the African summits, when donors are meeting, we have been taking them there to see if we can now actualize these projects. They are in all sectors, probably agriculture, energy, and others. Even at the COP currently happening, we took 4 of them to see if we can get somebody to have them to be actualized. So many things are happening, but we thank for...
Have there been any successes?
So far, not so much. Because again, the government has a priority. And our priority, we have this climate change affecting all sectors. But we are biased towards agriculture, we are biased towards water, and we are biased towards energy, and a bit of infrastructure, and maybe forestry, and others. So far, I'm yet to get a report from the COP. Maybe they were lucky this time, but it's been quite difficult. So efforts are being made, and like my other colleague talked about catalyzing those. So the other 33 which remained, we never threw them away. We are looking how can they be taken to the level of bankability. so that we are able to cater the climate change issues throughout the country. That's my submission for now.
Thank you very much. So a brief comment from our colleague Kinda Pelega online. Your own reflections on some of these issues. That sometimes we can even go the extent of getting the bankable projects developed, but there isn't any buy-in. What should we do? Okay. If we are not getting them online, I would now open the floor for discussions. There are many issues raised. There seems to be a strong feeling from the countries where CASI was implemented that some, oh, she's here. He's here. Okay, please go ahead. So the point we are making here, yeah.
Oui, merci bien. Je voudrais dire que le Burkina est honoré de prendre part à cette rencontre. Il faut dire que l'appui de CACSI au niveau du Burkina s'est traduit par un déploiement d'une expertise à travers le facilitateur pays du NDC Partnership. Et grâce donc à cet appui, les membres du NDC Partnership ont régulièrement la progression de l'état de mise en œuvre de la CDN du Burkina Faso. Ce déploiement également permet la coordination des partenaires de mise en œuvre donc, de la CDN du Burkina Faso. Et ce déploiement également facilite les interactions entre le gouvernement et les partenaires pour la mobilisation des ressources pour la mise en œuvre effectivement donc la CDN du Burkina Faso. Et à ce titre-là, nous avons une soixantaine de partenaires techniques et financiers sous la coordination de cette expertise déployée par CACSI pour pouvoir faciliter et accompagner le gouvernement dans la mise en œuvre de la CDN. Et c'est évident qu'autour de ce déploiement, il y a des mérites et il y a aussi de grosses insuffisances ou de gros défis en rapport donc avec la mise en œuvre effectivement donc de la CTN et également la mise en œuvre donc de la LTL Burkina Faso. Je rappelle que le Burkina Faso a validé sa LTL en décembre 2022. Et depuis lors, CACSI, à travers le déploiement de l'expertise, participe au renforcement des capacités, aussi bien en matière de mobilisation des ressources, en matière d'appropriation donc, de la LTLET, en matière d'appropriation donc, de la CDN du Burkina Faso. Et à présent, nos gros défis tournent donc autour de l'évaluation qualitative et quantitative qu'on voudrait effectivement faire de notre CDN. Ensuite, nous voudrions procéder à la révision de la CDN, comme l'accord de Paris l'exige pour l'ensemble des pays. Et l'un de nos gros défis autour de cette révision, c'est davantage travailler à une mobilisation donc, du secteur privé pour le financement effectivement donc, de la CDN. Pour le moment, le secteur privé est mobilisé autour donc, des énergies renouvelables, parce qu'en tant que pays sahélien, nous avons des opportunités à ce niveau-là. Et à présent, nous sommes en train de faire en sorte que l'assurance climatique, à travers un partenariat public-privé, puisse davantage mobiliser également donc, le secteur privé. Et à ce titre-là, nous souhaitons qu'à travers le processus de révision qui est amorcé, nous puissions effectivement avoir une plus grande implication donc, du secteur privé, parce que en réalité, au regard des gros montants dont on entend effectivement la mise en œuvre dans les CDN, tant que le privé ne va pas jouer donc, un rôle de leadership, ça serait toujours difficile. Et nous entendons également, pour un prochain défi, impliquer davantage les collectivités territoriales, parce que c'est là également, à travers un mécanisme de prise en compte des changements climatiques, donc dans les planifications locales, que nous pensions améliorer effectivement donc, les ambitions climatiques du Burkina Faso. À moins qu'il y ait une question spécifique, je voudrais m'arrêter là.
No, that's very good. And we want to know, so yeah, in terms of the insurance, what has been the interest of the private sector in it?
Pour l'intérêt du secteur privé dans les projets pilotes que nous avons eu au Burkina était assez considérable, mais il faut dire que jusque-là, nous avons eu plus de 20 000 producteurs qui se sont assurés, mais c'est à travers des systèmes de partenariat public-privé. Ce qui veut dire que jusqu'à présent, l'apport de ce partenariat public-privé reste déterminant pour l'acceptation effectivement des producteurs, quand on sait que dans notre pays, les petits exploitants n'ont pas de quoi s'octroyer donc une assurance agricole indicielle. Donc, ce qui veut dire que dans l'un ou l'autre, nous entendons effectivement faire en sorte que le secteur privé puisse voir à travers également donc les questions de changement climatique, qu'il a tout son rôle à jouer, et ce rôle à jouer va nous permettre effectivement donc de pouvoir réduire la vulnérabilité effectivement donc, de nos populations interpellables.
Thank you very much. I think 20,000 people or farmers is quite significant. Yeah. So I turn to you. That is our second main point, that we want feedback. We've shared the experiences, the challenges, and our expectations for the future. But we also want to hear from you some insights as to how we can take some of these things forward. So the floor is open. Okay, we do have a hand there. Okay.
Thank you so much. My name is Diemo Dikoti. I am with Catholic Relief Services, but I hail from the beautiful mountain kingdom of Lesotho. And from where I am, and especially the organization I represent, a keen interest would be on the farmers. Even for the course of the 3 days together, feel free to call me Mama Farmer, Madame Fermier. That's 5 marks for my ongoing French lessons. But really with the interest of how the information is also given to the farmers. The example from Lusaka, I think, was quite inspiring, given the early warning systems so that farmers can make informed decisions regarding their agricultural practices. It's important for us to also understand how that kind of information is given to the farmers. And I think it also speaks on best practices or some of the strategies that some of us can look into employing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just following up on Mama Farmer because I also come from the same region. My name is Tinashe Chavunduka and I work for the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions, better known as SACAU. We are the ROPA of Southern Africa for those who are from ROPA here in West Africa. So I don't know whether it's a question or not, but I'm going to say we did some rapid studies in 9 countries in Southern Africa where we were checking the participation of farmers' organizations in the NDC processes. So the results we got, they were very disappointing, especially from the perspective of farmers organized that there is little or no participation of farmers' organizations in the NDC processes. So our worry now is that if you go into the NDC documents, there's a section where they talk about AFOLU, and our interpretation of that is the farmers that are supposed to be implementing what the commitments that are put in that section of AFOLU. So if the farmers' organizations are not participating in the processes, how do governments expect farmers to participate in the implementation of the commitments they put in the AFOLU section of the NDC documents? Thanks.
Once again, my name is Timothy Silberg from Michigan State University, charged with institutional capacity strengthening. I wish I had beautiful names, you know, with meaning. The only one I can say is from Nigeria. They've named me Timmy Lane, so I'm coming with one. And I don't hail from beautiful mountains except from the streets of Philadelphia. But we have beautiful steps to a museum where a boxer sits named Rocky. In any event, I hate to bring it back to this, you know, sense, but just given ANAPRI's theme of institutional capacity strengthening, I was hoping maybe some of the panelists had some insights, including the ones that were on the Zoom. It seems that there's a lot of mention of implementation science, particularly from my Zambian colleague here, and the other one that was just attending. And I was just wondering, in your own opinion, according to the centers in the network of ANAPRI, is this something that is needed? Thank you.
Back to you, and not to pin anyone down. There are issues of information sharing with farmers and the approaches that can be used to enhance same. There are also issues on participation of farmers or producers in the NDCs and I suppose the NAP processes. How can we also improve that? And then the third point is on institutional capacity on the side of ANAPRI institutions and what reflections we can give. So in no particular order, if you can pick any and see if you can. Okay. Please go ahead, Richard.
I thank you. I think I'll use the case of Ghana to address the farmer issues. You know, so like I indicated in my submission, Ghana implements strategy through the subnational, the district assemblies, right? So the district assemblies, they do have representatives of the agri sector, representative of, let's say, the energy and all sort of sectors. And so in my submission, I made a point that it is important for us to train these people. And when we train these people, because these are the people that day to day relate with the farmers. And so in one of our districts that we visited, we have the Agriculture Directorate, who is responsible educating the farmers of the dire consequences of climate issues and also helping them on best agricultural practices that will help in solving this climate issue. So for example, we had indication from them that they are able to train them or talk to them that cutting, let's say, firewood to smoke fishes creates a lot of problems in terms of what reduction in plant population. So either you find a way of replicating it by planting more trees in addition, or you win away from such practices and use more environmental friendly approach in processing some of these fishes. So if we decentralize, that is why I was making the submission that what we found out in Kasi in Ghana is about the local level capacity building, because they are those people that relate with the actual actors, those who create these climate issues, because these climate issues are behavioral. They are implemented or they are being undertaken by the people there. So it is important for us to have that training, let them know what they're supposed to do so that they can communicate with the farmers. So that is what I would say in relation to that. And I think maybe other colleagues can take others, then maybe I'll come back if there's a need be to talk about the implementation challenges and other things. Thank you.
So how do we encourage farmer groups, farmers, farmer associations to participate in the NDC process? For instance, when we were revisiting the NAPs and NDCs in Zambia, how did we get the farmer groups on board for them to know what is in there so that they take them forward?
Thank you very much, and a very timely question. So it's farmer participation, especially in the NDCs. So you will recall that NDCs are in two. There are countries in Annex 2 who might not report sector-specific greenhouse gas emissions. They will just report generally. For example, Zambia has pledged to reduce 38,000 carbon equivalent, tons carbon equivalent by 2030. We have not specified which sector, per se. Annex 1 countries are compelled to state how much they reduce per sector. That's number one. But for a country like Zambia, we know, and my colleague is very right, that the AFOLU, agriculture, forestry, and land use are the major contributors to the emissions. Like, for example, a country like Zambia. So that is where our focus is, to ensure that we reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. But we're also noticing that other sectors like waste sector, transport, if you look at the congestion, the amount of vehicles on the road are slowly catching up. Currently, we are reviewing, because countries, again, by the year 2025, next year, in 3 months' time, in February, we expect to submit revised NDCs. So we are doing a carbon stock. And during the carbon stock, it's our hope that it's going to inform the next or third generation NDCs. So to ensure that we have, farmer participation, it depends at which level. So you find that we might invite maybe the Zambia National Farmers Union at that level, at a national level. When we go down at the sub-national level, when we go down even at the level of a district, we are going to find that my experience so recently was that the farmers themselves are not, that's the case of Zambia, we are not very much organized. You find that in a town, there were about 15 farmer unions. To mobilize them, who had their own issues, was quite difficult. But the role of a farmer, because the farmer is a contributor to their follow group, cannot be overemphasized. Our policies are very clear. They state how we must consult these people. But when you go on the ground to implement this, it becomes a bit of a challenge. So for us in Zambia, we're making every effort possible, and we hope that our enhanced NDC is going to have a voice of the farmer.
Thank you very much. Any brief, 30 seconds, 1 minute? We wrap up. Yeah.
Maybe just one very quick a contribution, and agreeing with the lady from the mountains that it is important for us to strengthen sub-national engagements with a number of stakeholders now. Looking at some of the conversations that I've had with, or rather we have had with countries such as Zambia, of course, at some point Senegal, and recently with Ghana, this is a common support request from governments, that they are seeking support to build capacities at sub-national level. There's a lot that has happened at national level, but there is this need to move that support to sub-national level so that we begin to develop sub-national plans as well that are aligned, of course, to the national level plan. So it is a common request by most governments at the moment, based on the conversations that we've been having.
Ouais, juste pour ajouter sur le fait que au niveau du Sénégal, je pense qu'il y a un aspect très important de sensibilisation au niveau du secteur de l'agriculture où l'ANACIM, la météo, est en train de travailler avec le CNAS pour la banque, la CNAS pour apporter un appui aux agriculteurs sur l'accès à l'information climatique. Je pense que ça, c'est un aspect très important, donc pour les permettre aussi d'aller dans des politiques d'adaptation beaucoup plus efficaces. Je pense que ça, c'est un aspect qu'il faut mettre à l'échelle, donc pour le sensibiliser au niveau de la mise à jour des NDC, etc. Donc je pense pour renforcer aussi l'aspect d'adaptation et même l'atténuation au niveau du Sénégal.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we finally have Molly Helmeth online to give us the closing remark.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Kindly go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Representative of the government of Senegal, representatives of African Union member states, representative of the African Union Commission, the leadership of ANAPRI, and heads of other institutions present, expert speakers, other conference participants, may I simply say, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to deliver these brief closing remarks following an engaging session on day one of the 11th annual ANAPRI conference. This session, titled Promoting Adaptation and Resilience to Climate Change in Africa, Lessons Learned from the Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative, was particularly insightful. It was really inspiring to hear about the lessons learned in promoting resilience and adaptation to climate change in Africa, to get feedback from policymakers and experts on how CASI's approach is strengthening national climate strategies, and I hope that we can continue to do that as CASI goes forward. And also, as the conference goes on, I'm hoping that you will work closely with my colleague, Dr. Nelly Shebo, to explore new opportunities for collaboration between governments, the private sector, and donors to enhance Africa's adaptive capacity in the face of climate change. This conversation follows the recently concluded COP29 meeting, which I was privileged to attend. And we all know that those convenings aim to find meaningful solutions to one of the most challenging issues of our time, climate change. But we also know, if you've been paying attention, that the outcomes fell short. But I'm hoping that we can build on the outcomes that did arise from COP29 very quickly, given that climate change will continue to increasingly threaten the livelihoods of populations in Africa, particularly vulnerable groups such as women and the young. Despite these challenges, it's important to recognize and to speak about the progress being made, and to use this positive outlook to identify what we can scale up or improve. And that is certainly the approach that we are taking with CASI. Events like the annual ANAPRI conference are significant because they provide a platform to share knowledge with policymakers, partners, and other key stakeholders about the urgent need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to the effects of climate change, aiming to create prosperous societies and a thriving environment. Ladies and gentlemen, the second phase of CASI, led by Act Global, is designed for USAID country missions to work in partnership with national governments, providing a range of services to meet their specific needs and fulfilling the Paris Agreement obligations. As my colleague and panelist, Dr. Nelly Shebo, mentioned, CASI continues to be committed to addressing demand-driven requests and to working with local partners and experts. CASI's objectives include providing timely support to policy processes, building the capacity of key policy institutions, integrating climate into sector policy, budgeting, planning, supporting implementation, and improving engagement and communication on climate impact and action. We heard today from Dr. Nelly Shebo, BCG, and others on how CASI is engaged in activities at national and continental levels to support NDC and NAP implementation in Africa, working with several partners, including the African Union Commission, MSU, Academia 2063, ANAPRI, WRI, and the NDC partnership. We will continue to seek and to identify opportunities in areas such as climate and health, food security, water security, energy security, climate finance, the development of bankable project pipelines, including within the specific niche of project preparation to attract investment through blended finance facilities, capacity building, and enhancing the enabling environment, and provide the support at regional, national, and subnational levels. CASI also recognizes the need to strengthen private sector participation and to be sensitive to gender equality and social inclusion in support of climate action. I don't think that we heard about this today in the remarks from Nelly Shabo, but on the private sector front, USAID signed an MOU in 2023 under the Partnership for Climate Action with companies including Genesis Energy Group, which is investing in Zambia and Nigeria to support these countries with smart alternative energy solutions. Genesis Energy Group is also currently looking to electrify rural areas in support of local livelihoods. CASI will continue in its efforts to promote private investment under climate action. On this note, let me congratulate ANAPRI for organizing this session and thank all the speakers for their insightful interventions. I also extend my gratitude to the leadership of ANAPRI for inviting me to make these closing remarks, the AUC for their collaboration with CASI, USAID for their continued efforts in guiding this initiative, and to all our other partners for their support. Finally, I thank the audience and the organizers of today's event. Thank you all for your attention.
Very much. Yeah. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Andrew. Thank you, distinguished panelists. Please remain seated. We would like to have a picture, a group picture of you, of all of you. Merci pour cette session enrichissante et vos contributions et vos perspectives locales sur comment renforcer aujourd'hui la résilience de l'Afrique face au changement climatique à travers l'action globale pour le changement climatique, CASI. Thank you for shedding light on pathways in order to strengthen Africa's resilience to climate change through the Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative, CASI. Before we, I think the photo have been taken, right?
They have, okay. Then we can.
Okay. Before we break, I would like everyone to rise up for a quick, let's say, stretch. If you're committed to strengthening Africa's resilience to climate change. Hold it there for a few seconds. Okay, now you will all use this door for the lunch break. Enjoy your meals, and please keep in mind that the high-level panel will take place at 2 p.m. sharp. Thank you all. Oh, good.